The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 6. Sub Persona Infantis. Chapter 4. The Children of Peter Pan. When people are told by a religious teacher that only children can enter the kingdom of heaven, they are glad, for they feel as helpless and little as that, and gather gladly in vast chattering crowds beneath the fostering wings of the church. Christ compared himself to a hen, clucking for her chicks, and holding out her wings, but he complained that they did not come. The child is, in fact, for most men, the eternal emblem of a happy irresponsibility, of the shorn lamb for whom the wind is tempered, of an inhabitant of fairyland where everything is rose-colored and turns out for the best, subjected to the dream control of the individual will, where you are shepherded and loved. Even the horniest old sinner will melt and nestle if invited to be a child once more. There is, it is yet to be admitted, about all the repercussions from the use of this sentimental religious lever, especially in the case of the Christian religion, this patent of childhood, in exchange for submission, an unpleasant sweetness, a self-pity, surrender of personality, that recommends it rather to one type of person than to another. The child is an equivocal figure. It is the symbol of the Eleatic becoming, of a malleable and impersonal thing. It is sexless, or ideally so. When invoked as a divine type, it is found that, in practice, it symbolizes, of the two halves of which it is potentially composed, rather the female than the male. It is not a sexually balanced symbol, but so preponderatingly feminine as almost to merge in the mother figure on which it is dependent, and to which it is so close. A mind abandoning itself to these emotions is betrayed into the most technical feminine role. The Peter Pan psychology often conflicts more sadly with the reality, when we observe some large and mature person behaving incongruously, than does any utopia provided with too concrete and immediate an incarnation. Were we as self-conscious and intellectually enterprising as the Greeks, as able to give effect and a lovely concrete shape to our obsessions, we should have our towns at present full of large statues of little children. Every variety of baby boy and baby girl would ogle us from their pedestals. For that matter, if the early Christian had been a plastic artist like the pagan whom he drove out, and intellectually scrupulous and imaginative at the same time, he would have filled the world with statues of little children, as the Greeks filled it with athletes. So it is sub persona infantis that the strategy of today would present itself. The vulture and the eagle dispense with their terrifying finials and beaks, and paddle luxuriously about the advective floor like doves. The naïf psychology is de rigueur. If you do not grow up, with the initiative, self-reliance, and so on associated with that action, there is no need for you to have an adult psychology either. In any case, the serious things of life are the frivolous things, are they not? So you are recommended to remain children, to remain kids, and not outgrow your own kids, but share their nursery with them and quarrel with them over wireless sets owned in common. That is the best way. To grow up, to do what Peter Pan so wisely refrained from doing, is to think and struggle, and all thinking is evil, and struggle is useless. Give up your will, cease to think for yourself, regard your employer as your good, kind father or uncle, leave everything in his hands. Barrie's play, Peter Pan, is to our time what Uncle Tom's Cabin was to the Civil War period in America. It gave expression to a deep emotional current, of political origin. The refusal to grow up of Peter Pan was the specific found by the narquois mind of the zeitgeist for the increasing difficulties connected with growing up. Don't you grow up. Refuse. That is what I should do. Through Sir James Barrie it almost jibed. Just go on being a kid. It's quite simple. No one can stop you. And really the zeitgeist is kind, and although today a little over-intellectual and sometimes indecorous, apt, as we have seen, to play rather humiliating tricks on those over whom he stretches his sheltering wing, he is nevertheless a true benefactor. But people are also becoming in reality more childlike, and the deliberate and imitative machinery of adult life is met halfway by a physical transformation. In the leveling, standardization, and pooling of the crowd mind, as the result of a closer organization from above and greatly increased pressure on any irregularities of surface or temperamental erection, it is the masculine mind that tends to approximate to the feminine rather than the other way round. This is inevitable, seeing that the masculine is not the natural human state, but a carefully nurtured secondary development above the normal and womanly. But women have always retained much more of the childlike in their mature life than men have, otherwise they would have found it impossible to support the constant society of their children. They have been the children that train our children. So it is that, as the man's mind is slowly immolated, and his personal will called into play less and less frequently, as he loses initiative, since he never has any opportunity of using it, and as all the intensive machinery of education and publicity sees to it that he shall not have to think, As he sinks to the more emotional female level, it is natural for him also to become more truly childish. There would never have been any difficulty about persuading a woman to remain a child for her highly important function. She was forced to remain one. And now it is equally easy to effect this little conformity with the man. So there is no longer any family, in one sense, there is now only a collection of children, differing in age but in nothing else. The last vestige of the patria potestas has been extirpated. The patria potestas is now that great organizing power that is the new, pervasive, all-powerful principle of our blind and complex life. But in another sense, the family is more obsessing with us than ever. For the reliefs to the domestic atmosphere that formerly existed are no longer so satisfactory or so numerous from the point of view of the average man. Still, this average man will soon disappear, and children get on better with each other than women do, for instance, between themselves. There is not the same need for a complementary and contrasting nature.